What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Alarm Fantasy Football. I'm your host, Howard Bender. With me here, of course, Britt Flinn. Fresh off of the lightning round. What's the lightning round crew up to these days, Britt? I haven't been there in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, so we drafted a Best Ball Mania 4 team, and
Ooh.
we were all set on having this great content and a completely unbiased and unspy-filled draft room. But Sellers got into the same draft as us. So he ended up taking Dalton Kincaid and Greg Dulcich. And then he was bitching that we took Laporta and Chig from him. And I'm like, dude, it works both ways. So it was a really exciting lightning round. There was a lot of fun going back and forth with the comments. Hopefully we'll both win and, in one way or the other, and we can have double pizza parties for everybody.
With extra toppings on those pizzas, no doubt. No doubt. Folks, if you missed the lightning round broadcast, just go to the Fantasy Alarm YouTube page. It's right there. You can't miss it. It's also on the lightning round's YouTube page as well. So you always want to definitely check in on that, especially with the best ball draft. All the underdog stuff that we've got, over at Fantasy Alarm. I mean, we give you the weekly prop picks that the daily prop picks for baseball right now. We're going to be diving fresh into all of that for the NFL as that goes on. So definitely jump in here now. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. You want to stay prepared. If you guys are going to the Fantasy Football Expo, make sure that you look us up, and because we might have a little something going on with Underdog at the Fantasy Football Expo. But I said too much. Smash that like and subscribe button on the Fantasy Alarm YouTube page, because again, that's how we feed our families. Great show planned for you guys here today. Drew Davenport from Football Guys and the Auction Brief podcast. He's going to join us this week. Fresh off of a very, very vicious bout of strep throat. We didn't want him to infect us last week, so we are bringing him in this week. We're going to talk auction strategy. We're going to talk about a lot of the legal issues. Joe Mixon definitely needs to be addressed here with a possible suspension looming, or is there? We'll talk to the lawyer himself, Drew Davenport, for that. So all that here at the Alarm Fantasy Football, but as you guys all know, how do we like to? Wait, you're going to be excited about this one, Britt. Are you ready for this? It's time for our news and notes segment. Earn Dog, hit it, baby.
Something I can dance to. I love this.
Bring it on in, Britt Flinn.
I love it. Sellers tossed my Gatorade bottle, aka my microphone, finally, out of the office. So I don't have my mic. I know, it was a prop. You would think if he watched these shows that he would know to leave it there. So anyway,
Britt, hold on a second. Let me get something into you here right now.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, I don't. It's a little football. I don't know. But anyway, I think that the big news today we're like little Twinkies here. No, the big news today that honestly shouldn't be that big of news, but we even saw it in our lightning round best ball draft. This is causing his ADP to rapidly rise, and that's Kareem Hunt. No. The Saints are expected to sign him as long as he passes his physical. So my question to you, Bender, is does this affect the way that you view either Jamal Williams or Kendre Miller or even Alvin Kamara for that matter? Or is this just like getting a body in to fix this depth situation?
My Kendre Miller shares. Oh, damn, the lighter doesn't work. So close, yet so far away. Yeah, dude, Kareem Hunt going to New Orleans. What a huge bummer. Huge bummer. Sellers, we know you're sorry that you threw away her microphone, but you know what? You'll make it up to her. I'll tell you what. Why don't you do us all a favor here, Sellers, and I don't know, take your lady to a Lana Del Rey show or something like that later on. Make that promise to me, and we're even Steven on the whole I threw away her microphone prop. Britt, I don't like it. Do you like it?
I don't really. I mean, it shouldn't move the needle completely, but it just causes so much more uncertainty in that backfield that we already had. Those first 3 games, he's probably going to be used as a pass catcher. But when Kamara comes back, last year he was used as a between the tackles guy when he really isn't a between the tackles guy. So are they going to continue to use him for that? Are they going to put him back in the pass catching role? Are either Williams or Miller going to get that center role? Or is it just going to be like completely foobarred? I don't know. And I don't like it.
It's kind of foobarred, actually. I mean, you figure this, right? Because Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara at this point in time, and I see Skinny McKinney in the chat there, unnecessary signing. He's a diehard Saints fan, so he knows, as well as the rest of us. But like, to me, Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara are the same type of running back. They are the same guy, and maybe that's why you've got Kareem Hunt. Who knows? Maybe if Kareem Hunt looks really good in those first 3 weeks, that they have the opportunity to trade him. Somebody else, piques some interest. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel like, if you've got Kendry Miller in there, who's, supposed to be your running back of the future, you use Jamal Williams in the between the tackles, and then Kareem Hunt / Alvin Kamara goes, stays in that kind of pass catching role that they usually have them slotted in. This is, it just went from bad to worse already.
Yeah. And as far as trade bait, we should already know by the state of the running back position within the NFL that trade bait for a running back is not going to work. If you can't sign these guys in free agency, like, what are you going to get? A bag of soggy popcorn and a dirty sock, maybe? Like, I don't see that you get like a huge return on trading a running back, even if he does have a good season, because likely there's still going to be running backs floating out in free agency that you can get for nothing. So it's super puzzling to me, and I don't like it.
I kind of want to know who hurt you that soggy popcorn and a dirty sock were the first things that you went to.
You know how many festivals I've been to, Bender? You know how many wooks I've dealt with?
Oh, yeah. That is the worst. I'm with you. All right. Well, listen, this is something that we're going to have to take a look at. I don't think Kareem Hunt's ADP should be shooting up, up draft boards, unless the Saints turn around and they say that there's something else going on with Alvin Kamara, which I don't think they are. They took the 3-game suspension. I probably feel lucky about it. And maybe this is just them keeping themselves covered for the first 3 weeks of the season. But for those of you who are going to sit there and, and grab Kareem Hunt in drafts, just understand this is likely to be a very, very short-term use. It's not going to be big.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. So let's move on. I'm tired of talking about this dirty sock situation.
Kareem Hunt, the dirty sock. That's it. That's the tweet, people. Kareem Hunt equals dirty sock.
He's messing up all of your laundry. So Rashee Rice was seen limping off the field with a trainer today at Chiefs practice. With as much hype as he's been getting throughout training camp, and with the news that Kadarius Toney should be ready for week 1, are you a little bit concerned about him? I know you have a lot of shares in particular of Rashee Rice. Does this injury, concern you a little bit?
No, not at all. Not at all. It doesn't sound like, first of all, he was seen limping off the field. If it were a high ankle sprain, he would have needed to be helped off the field. So that's comfort factor number 1. Number 2, he and Kadarius Toney play a totally different style of game. Rashee Rice stretches the field, gets up for contested catches, works the defensive backs with his speed. That's, everybody who's, complaining about the diminishing ADOT for Patrick Mahomes. Rashee Rice is actually an option that can help fix that problem much better, with better consistency than MVS really has that style. Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, they're like interchangeable cogs. Those are guys that are like the exact same player almost. So, Kadarius Toney being back for week 1, good. I'm glad. You know what? It's, I do have some early best ball shares of him, so I hope that those don't get flushed down the toilet. I was a little worried because he's a little, but, listen, as long as he's on the field. Rashee Rice, listen, taking him in the 12th and 13th round of drafts, people, of a 16-round draft where you have to draft a kicker and a defense too, like that's the price you're paying for Rashee Rice. Do not be afraid of any of this news like one of the things, and I don't know how you feel about this, Britt, but this is like one of the things that Jim Bowden and I were talking about on the Fantasy Alarm Show. When you're sitting there and you're building and you're looking for those upside picks in those, much later rounds, grabbing guys like Jonathan Mingo, Rashee Rice, Jalen Hyatt, right? Those are the great picks because they have upside. They each have the ability to possibly be a number one wide receiver on their team, and you only need one of them to pop, right? Like that's the thing, because your top half of your draft, those are your starters. These are depth plays that you can let them sit on your bench for a couple of weeks, see how they do, see how they develop, and then determine who stays and who goes. That's the strategy that I love to employ with a lot of these late round picks. So, like no news should be scare you unless they say they're going to cut one of these guys. No news should scare you off of those late round picks.
Yeah, totally. And barring injury, who you draft to be in your starting lineup should be your starters up until week 5, the first bye weeks. And by week 5, we should be able to see a little bit of development one way or the other from these guys who you stash on your bench. So if they haven't developed, by week 5, 6, 7, then it's time to start evaluating them. But by the time you're going to have to start plugging them into your lineup, you should be able to know one way or the other if these guys are going to pay off. So just holding them there and basically blocking everybody else in your league from spending their fab on them, make them go find the fourth wide receiver in the depth chart. Make them go dumpster diving. You have that stash upside, and that's a little bit of just advanced thinking and advanced strategy. And nice. I love it.
I want to shout it out to welcome the Rushman here, right? Just found the show, had his auction draft last Sunday. Hope it went well there, Rushman. You should hit up, Britt Flinn at Britt_Flinn, FLINN. And you can get her Twitter handle, and maybe she can take a look at that team. You can tag me at RotoBuzzGuy, and we can definitely do that. Drew Davenport's going to come in. Last week we started talking about our preferred auction strategy. Drew Davenport's going to dive in even deeper with us here. So we got you guys smothered and covered. Hope that draft went well there, Rushman. Appreciate that.
Britt. Is that a Lana Del Rey reference since she's been working at Waffle House, the smothered and covered?
No, you know what? I love, so, a fat guy, right? So anytime I've gone down south for like any kind of shows, I always insist on like the Waffle House or whatever. And every time we go out for breakfast, everything is smothered and covered for me because I'm fat and I'm gluttonous, and that's the way it should be. Everything should be just, drenched in sausage gravy, in my opinion. So yeah, that's what happened to me, Britt.
The sausage gravy is highly, highly underrated. So in minimal news here, I don't know if we have to stay on this topic for very long, but the Lions did bring in quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. I think that this signing makes sense. I've seen some people on Twitter saying that it kind of hints to the fact that Hendon Hooker isn't really grasping the playbook. But in my opinion, I think that it's a depth piece because we knew that Hooker wasn't going to be able to go this year, period, point blank. You look at whoever else was on that team, can't even remember their name. That's how bad and like irrelevant they were. So I think that this is a very smart signing for them, especially considering the injuries and kind of lack of depth that they have in other pieces of their roster. What do you think about the signing?
Yeah, I agree. The big knock on Teddy Bridgewater is that he just can't throw deep. But for the short West Coast style passing, those high percentage plays, he's fantastic with that. So yeah, if something happens to Goff early on, at least, the Detroit Lions are they believe that they can win this division. They believe that they're going to the playoffs. So in order to make sure that they've got that depth behind it, I think it's a great signing. It'll be problematic late in the season if you need to use Teddy Bridgewater, because who's going to get the ball to Jameson Williams downfield? But overall, I think it's a perfectly fine, backup plan.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think we have to talk about that a bunch. Super smart signing and probably very cheap and salary cap friendly. So New Orleans Football Network's Brooke Kirchhoff said Saints wide receiver Rashid Shaheed is expected to miss, quote, the next few weeks with a groin injury. Michael Thomas, he says that he's healthy, but we don't really know. We haven't seen him in 2 years. Does the depth of the Saints wide receiver room worry you?
Um, no, because maybe it gets Juwan Johnson a little bit more heavily involved. Yum, 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 yum. That's smothered and covered in that. I would love to see Juwan Johnson get more involved. Listen, he's like the prototypical jumbo tight end who's got the speed and the route running ability of a wide receiver. So yeah, like, load it up. Give me all the Chris Olave. You can sprinkle in some Michael Thomas. Shaheed is just a field stretcher anyway. So, send more targets Juwan Johnson's way, and I'm a happy camper. Let
Yeah.
everybody else get Kirkwood or
Yeah. Traquan
whoever it is
Smith,
there.
who's also out.
Oh, yeah.
I actually think that like Marquez Callaway and Lil Jordan Humphrey went to the Denver Broncos. So they don't even have a lot of their late round supporting cast. The Saints head coach Dennis Allen also said that the starters will play in the preseason opener against the Chiefs. I think that that'll give us a very good idea about what we were talking about earlier, how they intend to use Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller. We'll get to see a little bit of that, albeit just a glimpse. Anything from that game that you're looking to take away from it?
Nah. Well, now it's all about seeing what Juwan Johnson does in this first preseason game. Is he more inclined to catch some passes? How are they going to get everything up and moving over there? So I love it, baby. I love it.
And the crowd goes wild.
And the crowd goes wild. All right, let's since we're gonna probably move through, and we've got a couple more popcorn headlines that we got to deal with. Let's change gears now. Let's get him in here. It's at Drew Davenport FF on the old Twitter machine. He is the host of the Auction Brief podcast. He is from footballguys.com. He's got Abbey Road in the background and just such a handsome look on his face right there. I like the ficus tree in the background too. That's a really nice touch there, Drew. Well done. Welcome to the show, baby. How are you?
Well, I tried to switch up the vinyl a little bit in the background, but I've had the Abbey Road up there for like a week and it's treating me well. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, your setup is a whole vibe. You've got the ficus tree, you've got Abbey Road, and then you've got a couple of championship belts, if I'm not wrong, back there.
What are those? Yes.
I don't know. You tell us.
That's a couple of King's Classic auction championship belts there.
Oh, really? Did I face you in the auction last year, the King's Classic? Are we in the same? We're not in the same division, are we?
I don't think so. No, I'm in the Blanda room. I won in 20 and 21.
Oh,
Had a rough
right.
year last year, but yeah, I got a back-to-back title to claim there. So
Well,
I won't be shy. I'll tell you about it.
All right, you know what? Let's do that. We've got some new subscribers in here watching the show, watching the program. Let's talk some auction draft strategies here, and then we'll get into some of the legalese surrounding some of these annoying running backs that we're dealing with. Let's start off with the probably the most basic question of all, Drew, and that is for anybody out there who's doing an auction for the first time, probably feeling a little bit intimidated, maybe a little out of their depth. They're not really sure exactly how to go about it. What's the primary advice that you give to somebody doing an auction for the first time?
Well, I know that auctions are all about flexibility, and I get that. But when you're doing it for the first time or you're doing it and you haven't done very many, I think it's really important to set guide rails up for yourself. Sort of like when you go bowling and you put the bumpers up. It's really not a bad idea to get dialed in on exactly what you want to spend. And there's a term that I've coined that's called a par sheet. And it's something that my followers get tired of hearing me talk about, but I think it's the greatest piece of advice that I've brought to auction drafting in general, because I tell people, if you have 16 spots, go down all 16 spots on that roster, put down exactly what you want to spend on each spot. Now, when you get into the auction, of course, you don't want to stick to that exactly because that's going to hamstring you. But you do want to use that as a guide, and it sort of helps you. Like, you get caught up and get excited at the beginning of the draft, and it'll prevent you from overspending and say, oh, well, gosh, Barkley was only $38, and I already had Eckler and he was 52. but I just thought I couldn't pass up Barkley because he was 38. Well, if you look at your par sheet and you realize that ahead of time you told yourself, I'm not going to spend more than X amount of dollars on these positions, then you know that even though there's a deal for Barkley sitting there staring you in the face, that you just can't bid. And so it really helps you to have exact numbers written down. And like I said, don't stick to them exactly. You don't want to do that. That is going to, make you struggle a little bit. But I think beginners need to have those guardrails in place.
Yeah, I will speak from experience on this, doing my first auction last year and only having a day of prep because I got thrown into the Kings Classic auction. I decided very quickly, printed out the Fantasy Alarm cheat sheet, which does have auction values and is available on the site as part of the draft guide, fantasyalarm.com/draft. If you want the draft guide and the cheat. But printed that out, and honestly, it had everything that I needed. And I did exactly what you said to do, Drew. I went through and I was like, okay, where are these guys typically going in value? Am I willing to spend a little bit more or a little bit less on these guys? And it helped me so much. So that is, I think, one of the best pieces of advice that anybody new to auctions can take away from this.
And if I could just add here too, that average auction values or finding a set of values that you like is really important for preparation. And then I say the other thing that people think is a little bit weird, but once you look at those values and you kind of have them in your head and you have a general idea of what they're going to go for, I tell people to don't bring those in the room, because that is also going to hamstring you. You're going to think, okay, well, this says that it should only go for this. But that's just a general rule because every room's different. So you're never going to go into a room and have it go exactly like somebody's value sheet says. Those value sheets are super important for preparation. I really believe that. I just think that they bother you when you're in a room because you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this guy's going for $3 cheaper than he should. And then all of a sudden you've stacked up a bunch of $8 players, or you think all these top players, they're going way cheaper than they should. And then you have three $46 players on your team and you go, whoops, I shouldn't have done that. So I leave those values aside, but having them ahead of time is crucial to preparation.
Drew, what's your style in an auction room? I mean, everybody's got their own style and everybody's got their own way about them. But, going into an auction, especially if you're auctioning with people who don't know you very well, like it's a good time to sort of, I don't know, play a role, put on a different face, be a different person than from what you are normally in life. Do you prefer to be aggressive? Do you like bullying people in auctions? I mean, I love bullying people in auctions. I try to be a happy-go-lucky fun guy, but there's nothing like bullying somebody into bowing out from a bidding thing. What's your general style?
Well, I'm a pretty laid back guy, but I just spent 45 minutes in the last episode talking about how to be a killer. And what I said was, it requires people like me being able to flip a switch that you don't always have unless you really practice it. I know that sounds silly. Well, how do you practice being aggressive? Well, you practice techniques that allow you to be aggressive. So, and I likened it to, like, if you think about Tom Brady and you think, well, why was he a killer at the end of a game? It was because he was really prepared. It doesn't sound interesting or exciting to sit in a film room and study film for hours and hours and hours, but that's what he did. And that's what being a killer means. So being super prepared is important to that. But what I guess leading around to the point of your question is, I have a laid back personality. So I need all of these little tools and things that make me more aggressive. And one of the things that I like to do is just to make myself be active on every bid. So when you talk about being a bully in the draft room, I'm kind of the guy that I don't want you to breathe. All right. So I don't really want you to have a moment to think, is this a good price or is this not? Because I'm going to be there hammering the bid. So you call out, Jerry Judy, I'm going to be right there. $8, $10, $12, $14, because I know that Judy should go for 18 or 20. I'm not going to stop until it gets close because I don't want you to have time to think about it. So I'm going to be aggressive in that way. But I'm also the guy that, and I made this analogy too. I don't know if you guys have watched Quarterback yet on Netflix, but I love when Patrick Mahomes was talking about how he just likes to compliment guys and just, he pats them on the head. Nice rush. Nice job. Way to hit me. It's kind of like the old Andrew Luck thing. It's like if everyone in the room likes you and they say, hey, I'm going to give this guy a break consciously or subconsciously because they like you, I think that always helps. So I'm going to try to be the killer and be aggressive, but I also want to do it with a smile on my face and a lot of jokes so people like me and they don't want to be too hard on me.
Oh, the old double-edged sword.
Right, a little sneaky,
The killer with
there.
a smile.
Right? I'm gonna stab you in the back and I'm gonna grin doing it. How are you?
That's what I like.
I like that. I like that. All right. So what are so establishing your budget, being fluid with your budget as you're going on and going through certain things. What about nominations? One of the things that I've always said, about, when you nominate is always have a purpose. Don't just throw a name out there because you're completely unprepared and you're just going to throw the next name out there. You always have to have a purpose with nominating. We've seen some crazy strategies in the past. What's your recommendation as far as getting behind each nomination?
I tell you what, thank you so much for saying that, Howard, because nominations are so important. And I always say this, if you have a 16-man roster, you're only getting 16 chances to push the draft the way that you want it to go. So once every round, you're going to get that shot. You control so few things in an auction draft room that when you have the chance to control them, why would you pass that up? Why would you want to give away just because you're not ready for your nomination? Hey, Drew, you're on the clock. Oh, no. And then I just picked the top guy on the list. That doesn't help you. It doesn't do anything for your vision of where you want the draft to go. So I could talk about nominations for an hour, but let me bring it down to a couple quick points. The first thing I would say is you have to, early on in a draft, we got to get away from the idea that just calling out people that you don't want to waste people's money is a good idea. Logically, that's a very sound sort of A follows B, or B follows A. I get that. That sounds logical, but there's too much money in the room at the beginning of a draft. So wasting someone's money, you're not, they're going to buy a good player anyway. So let them buy their good players. That's not doing anything. What you want to do early in a draft is say, where am I headed? Am I going to be on a wide receiver heavy build? Am I trying to get Travis Kelce? If you're trying to get Kelce, call him out right away. Nobody's going to forget about Kelce. You're not getting a discount on Travis Kelce. Call him out right away. Find out if you're going to get him, because then that sends your draft in one direction or another. You're not going to have to pay $45 for any other tight end in the room. So find out if you're going to use it on him. So that's one thing. Early on, always be nominating guys that push your draft in the direction that you want. And then the second thing is, I'll go back to something, Howard, that you said right when you started, which I absolutely love. Have a reason. And I've said this before. The people who listen to my show probably, again, they get tired of hearing it, but have intention here. What is the point of having a nomination if you don't use it to your benefit? So think about what that reason is. And sometimes people will just say, oh, well, I picked this guy. And they throw out a reason like, oh, I like this guy. Well, that's not really a reason. Okay. We like a ton of guys. There's 80 guys I would draft. So say the reason in your head. Say, why am I nominating this guy? Well, I'm nominating him because this other player in the room has a lot of money and I have the second most amount of money. He needs a running back, but I need a wide receiver. So I don't want to nominate a wide receiver because he's got too much money. So then that leads you to the running back. So say that in your head. Go through the dialogue in your head. And once you do it a few times, you don't have to say it anymore. Your brain's just going to do it. You're going to go through the motions once you train yourself to do it.
That's such good advice on both points, because I like to say that I do like to play the bad guy and nominate players that I don't want, that other people will waste their money on.
There's a time for that.
That's such a good point. Like, just like everything, there's a time and place for everything. Make sure that you don't do it in the beginning rounds, because that wasn't something that I was thinking of last season. And then the nominating with intention is something that I didn't even think about last season as a first-time auction drafter. I was just throwing out names, and I didn't really see who had who needed who. And I can see how that really changes your strategy. That advice is just so good, and just another little nuance that people don't think about all the time.
Yeah, see, right? You got the little hang loose on there. I was gonna actually ask you, Drew, like, what's the biggest mistake that you see people making in an auction, right? But Rushman in our chat room right now kind of threw that already out there. My biggest pet peeve, the thing that I hate the most. So you tell me, like Rushman says, the absolute worst thing that you can do that can happen to you is that you're left with money on the table at the end of your auction. It's the worst feeling. It is the worst feeling. It means that you've mismanaged your budget, and it means that you probably should have gone the extra dollar on like 2 or 3 different players that you bowed out on. But aside from being that schmuck who leaves his money on the table, and I mean, when I say schmuck, I mean somebody who does like $5 or more. The occasional $1 oops. I'm not going to be crazed about, but what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people doing in drafts, in auctions specifically?
Well, somebody just put it up in the chat here. First of all, if I see you paying more than $1 for a kicker or defense, I'm going to get upset. Yeah, George is getting upset. So
angry.
So yeah, that's one of them. But yeah, leaving money on the table, a couple bucks is one thing. But I did it the other night where I had like 7 wide receivers that I absolutely loved, and I came out of this auction.
And he came out of this auction stoned out of his gourd, and he fell asleep. Nope, there he is. You froze for a second there, Drew.
Oh my gosh, I hope yeah. So I came out.
Aw, he froze again.
Oh no. We're on the edge of our seats here.
I know, right? This is like the second time. What? Are you back?
Am I back?
There you are. Now you're back. Okay.
I'm sorry. It popped up and said that we're resolving issues here. So sorry about that.
That's my therapist just messaging you that I have a lot of issues that I have to get through, Drew. But nevertheless, you've hit us now with the
we have all weekend to talk about that. Yeah. Yeah. So I came out of this auction the other day with a bunch of nice wide receivers, and I had $6 left, and I hate that. But sometimes you get caught because you didn't pay as much as you thought you were going to for some of these guys, and I understand that. So like, I think $5 is a good mark there. You definitely, if you have less than 5, you're doing pretty good. But one of the other things that I talk about is I think that probably a worse feeling than leaving money on the table is taking yourself out of the auction real early by just leaving yourself no flexibility. So one of the things I tell people just to keep in your head, and this is early but also late, is what's this going to do to my flexibility for the draft going forward? So always ask yourself that question before you bid. So early on, what that looks like is, okay, I already have my RB1. I paid $44 for my RB1. At that point, you're probably not getting another $40+ running back. So just put it out of your head and say, all right, I just can't do that now.
Yeah.
So tell yourself that kind of thing, because there's nothing worse than being like, I'm pumped up for this auction. And then 2 rounds in, you've spent most of your money and you have to sit there for 2 hours. Like, that sucks. That's not any fun. Who wants to do that? I think that's a worse feeling, is just being like that hot, like, the feeling. It's almost like that hot embarrassment that rushes your face. You're like, oh my God, I spent all my money and the draft isn't even started yet. So I think that stinks. But at the end of the draft too, think about it like this. Like, when you have a certain number of roster spots and a certain amount of money left, you want to try to control the last part of the draft. Now, I've said before, you don't want to have the most money because there's not going to be enough guys to spend it on. But you want to be in the top 3 or 4 of the most money as you're getting near the end of the draft. And you want to tell yourself, if I bid on this guy, what's it going to do to my flexibility? Because at a certain point, the roster spot is more important than a couple dollar deal. Now, if you need the player, of course, go get it. But the roster spot sometimes matters more. And so I always tell myself, if I land this player, subtract that money, that really brings me into the middle of the pack, this big glut of 8 managers that have this money, and I still got 5 spots to fill. Now, I'd rather just have the money in the spot and I just pass on the player. So I think about that all the time.
Yeah, it's such good advice too. And I know I keep bringing it back to last year's Kings Classic, but that's the only auction experience that I have. So I have to keep bringing it back to that. What you mentioned about not spending all your money up front is something that, again, I had never experienced. I went into this draft thinking that I was going to do a studs and duds draft. I was going to get a stud at every position, and pretty much it worked. I got Travis Kelce, got Josh Allen, but those were very pricey players.
Those
So
are
within the
studly
first
players.
30, without the first 30 minutes of the draft, I'd filled out all my top 4 positions. Bob Lung called me out in front of everybody and he's like, "Hey, you only have this much money left." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. I'm waiting on the lower tiered players." But in between that top tier and that lower tier, I was just kind of sitting there and I was like, crap, I'd let all these players kind of escape from me because I was so gung ho on just getting a body to fill that spot. So definitely good advice there that I will not be doing in the future.
Well, it's a good thing that you were sitting next to like the coolest guy in the auction there, Britt. So you had some entertainment to go along with the fact that you were sitting out. Jim Bowden did that also. I brought in Jim Bowden into his first fantasy auction, and that dude came out guns blazing and like dropped $40+ on a pair of running backs, and then started to attack the wide receiver position, and then like literally just sat there, looking at me going, am I just supposed to sit here now? Yeah, Jim, sorry. You just left yourself $4 per player to finish out another 12 rounds of auctioning. So yeah, you're just going to have to sit there. I mean, listen, poor budgeting is a huge issue. I mean, that's one of the main things that you have to, be able to adapt to. It's like trying to, you have your targets and you set your targets, right, Drew? And then from there, like you said, you get your targets, you go after the guys who you want, and then it's about finding the value that's happening in the draft. And that's actually that's kind of a it's kind of misleading because every year and every auction is different. But more often than not, like, how do you identify where that value is showing up in your auction? How quickly does it reveal itself so that when you are game planning on the fly, like, how comfortable are you early on being like, I know that I'm going to get value wide receivers, or I know I can get value backs late?
Yeah, so springboarding off the last topic, I think this all ties together because you can get too caught up in like, hey, that's a pretty good price, and then you end up bidding. You're going to have to get comfortable with passing on some deals. It's going to happen. So just get comfortable with it and just say, I can't buy every deal that comes along. Every guy that comes in under the price I expected he was going to pay, you just can't do it. So you're just going to have to get comfortable with that. And I always say, just sit around and wait a little while. Watch what everyone's doing. There are plenty of players. You start to get nervous, like, oh man, we've got 8 top guys off the board in the first 9 picks, and you get nervous, like, I'm not going to get anybody. There are plenty of players. I promise you, there's plenty of players. Now, to your point, Howard, I call these points during a draft inflection points. All right. Now, my buddy admonishes me all the time that this is a math term. I got it from poker. Okay. So, but I play a lot of tournament poker. So, at various points in a poker tournament, things shift where you have to play a little bit differently, like when you're on the money bubble or when you're early in the tournament or when you're big stacked or short stacked. You have to play different at those inflection points. And I think the biggest way that you can improve your auction game quickly is starting to find those inflection points in the auction. And you'll notice it because you'll see something a little bit odd happen. And that odd thing didn't just happen out of thin air. That odd thing happened because of a confluence of events. So the first time somebody goes, oh, wow, great deal for that guy, like that should be okay. Something's going on here. So I like to say that you can't spot the inflection points until you're looking for them. So once you start to realize, hey, these are things that are happening, then you start to see them. That first time, let's say, I think one of the first inflection points that you see is what I call the sitting down bonus. Okay. And people, again, I'm sure are tired of hearing me say this, but I love the analogy. There's an episode of Friends where Joey and Chandler are playing a made up card game called Cups. And Chandler tries to give him money and he says, oh my gosh, you got the sitting down bonus, and he pays him extra money. There is a sitting down bonus at almost every auction. And that's in the first 2 to 6 nominations. players are going to be cheaper than they should be. Everyone's a little laid back. They have all their money. They don't want to spend it right away. You can oftentimes get in and get a deal right away. Now, in really strong draft rooms like the Kings Classic, you might not see that as much, but in the more green draft rooms, you are going to see that. That's number one. But you'll notice that end when the prices start to hit that market value. Say, okay, the sitting down bonus has ended. That's inflection point one. And then inflection point two usually comes after the top guys. All of a sudden, people realize, hey, we don't have to nominate every single top guy on the board. We could nominate somebody else. So you find yourself in the middle of round two, and somebody calls out Dallas Goedert. And you say, all right, maybe things are shifting a little bit here, because people just realized, let's branch out and talk about some different players here. So, and then again, there's several during the draft that are going to happen, but you got to look for them. And like I said, if somebody makes a comment, great deal, or oh my gosh, nobody wanted to bid on that, there's a reason. It usually means the money's drying up, and hopefully you have some money and you're about to score some deals after somebody says that. So get your player out there. Stop wasting your nomination at that point to waste people's money. Get your guy out there and see if you get the deal.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, well, since you brought poker into it, this gives us the perfect segue, because for those of you who are in attendance over at the Fantasy Football Expo this coming weekend, the three of us are going to be there. The three of us are also playing in the Football Guys Icebreaker Poker Tournament. We did this last year. Drew, before we start, finding out your little hidden poker secrets, you've got a hell of an announcement right now with a couple of spots that are still available in the poker tournament for this weekend. Can you let everybody know about the deal that you got going on?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Howard. We are trying to raise some money for charity. So we held back 2 seats. There's 54 spots in the tournament. We held back 2 seats. We're pulling some money off the top of those original buy-ins anyway, $10 per seat. But then we said, let's pull 2 seats back, and as soon as it sells out, we're going to release those 2 seats, and people can bid on them, and it's for a great cause. So right now, I believe the seats are at $60 each is the highest bid right now. It just got going yesterday afternoon. But you can go on my Twitter account, Drew Davenport FF, and I just noticed on the bottom of the screen it has my old name. So it's Drew Davenport FF, and you can bid in just $5 increments. Just go bid 65 and see if it holds up. But we're donating 100% of the money from those 2 seats to charity on top of what we've already collected. So thank you. Appreciate that.
I love that. At Drew Davenport FF on Twitter. Definitely give him a follow, first of all. If you don't, I'm coming for you. But also jump in. I mean, listen, this tournament, I was big stacked, like early on in the tournament. I just kept getting cards and nobody believed me, and yet I kept flipping them over. And then I couldn't let a hand go. And so I ended up on tilt for a little while, and I just pissed it all away. So you can bid on one of these seats and then be that person who puts me on tilt and takes my entire stack away from me.
I'm trying to be that guy.
No, you're not.
Yeah, after last year, I'm trying to be that guy since you took all my money last year at my table.
I took you out, didn't I?
Yes, because we somehow got assigned at the same table. And so I end up sitting next to Howard Bender on the very first day, and he takes all my money.
I was at your table too. It's random, I promise. I tried to put one bigger name analyst at each table, and then after that it was random. So
yeah, we'll naughty list.
I forgot about that. You know how good that feels, Drew? Remember, Drew, you're a poker guy, so when somebody recognizes you as the person that knocked them out of a tournament previously, or you took a bunch of their stuff. Like, how good does that make you feel?
Are you guys getting me? I saw the little message pop up. Am I frozen? I'm good.
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, no, it does feel pretty good. I will say I have the same philosophy at the poker table that I do in an auction draft room. I want you to like me, and I want you to call me. I never want to get called. I don't care if I have 17 aces. I don't want you to call me because you're going to beat me somehow. You're going to suck out of me somehow. I actually, George Reed, I don't know if you know him from Twitter, but I knocked him out last year, and he has not stopped talking about it. And it is kind of funny. It's like I had ace king, he had queen jack, So I'm actually not that huge, big of a favorite there. I'm about 65-35 there. And I held, and I actually had some good luck as far as holding in those spots because I didn't get very many good cards. So the cards I got, I ended up holding in some big spots and allowed me to get deep. But it feels pretty good when somebody knows that you were their executioner. The thing is, like I said, it's I want people to be happy as they walk out the door, and I say thank you for your money. I appreciate it. I had a really great time sitting next to you. I don't want people to feel aggressive and coming back at me.
Oh, not me. Here, Britt, here's a tissue that you can cry into now. There you go.
I don't get mad. I just get even.
Oh, I don't know if the random seat generator is going to put you guys next to each other this year.
Yeah, put big, real massive quotes around that one, Drew.
I promise it was random last year. I promise.
No, I had a blast. I'm just teasing.
Oh, it was so great. It was so great. And I can't wait. And that's the funny thing. Like I'm like flying in on Friday. The poker tournament, ladies and gentlemen, is it starts at, was it 12 p.m. or 1 p.m.? I think it's 1 p.m. Eastern that it starts over at the Fantasy Football Expo. You want to make sure that you that you get a spot in there. Saturday are all the drafts. Sunday is, booths and all sorts of fun and excitement there. My man Drew, he's so happy and he's so frozen in that one fell swoop right there.
He is frozen, but can you imagine, a more perfect frozen picture? Because when I get frozen, I'm always making like a stank face or something. Like, my lips like all the way over here. That is a perfect frozen profile.
Should we make some like funny faces so when he unfreezes and he sees us, he's like, what the hell just happened here?
It's going to be like, what is happening?
I'm like waiting for his like image to shake a little bit. Oh, no. Oh, Dog takes him out. Well, all right. If Drew gets his connection fixed back up, I just want to be able to say goodbye, let him promote everything that he's got going on. But again, dude, you got to give at Drew Davenport FF a follow on Twitter. And listen, if you guys are at the expo, if you girls are at the expo, if you things are at the expo, you best come and say hi to me and Britt. We're going to be hanging out, having a great time. We got a little Fantasy Alarm booth. We're both going to be drafting. We're both going to be doing all sorts of fun stuff for the company. And then also, you got Andrew Cooper, Colby Conway, Kevin Tompkins, Matt Deutsch, the better boss. He's going to be there as well. So we definitely don't want to miss out on anything there. It doesn't look like we're going to get Drew back here. But again, let me remind you guys, the Auction Brief podcast, it's a must listen. And I think the new episode drops on Thursday for the new Auction Brief. And the only reason I know exactly when it's going to drop is because I was on it. Right? Me and Drew having a blast the other day doing all that stuff, all that fantasy football stuff. But yeah, and then go check out all of his work over at Football Guys. The Football Guys is an amazing website. Great people over there. Some of my absolute favorites: Drew Davenport, Joe Bryant, Hutch Brown is over at Football Guys too, right? You had Hutch on Britt's Blitz a couple of weeks ago, right?
I did. He was my inaugural guest, and every time I speak to that kid, he blows me away with just how much is in that little young brain about football.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy, right?
Yes.
Like if you want to pull like the had I known then what I know now, I would have started at his age.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Instead of waiting until I'm well into my 30s. But something about the poker tournament
when are you well into your 30s? What are you, 26 right now? 25?
I'll
24,
never tell.
23?
I will never tell.
22, 21?
No,
20?
everybody knows that I'm a millennial because I do stupid millennial things all the time. But no, the thing about the poker, I cannot say poker tournament for some reason. There's also like door prizes and food and all kinds of fun stuff. That room at the hotel that we were playing poker in was so cold last year. And the very first door prize was that Football Guys hoodie.
Well, it
saved me for the rest of the weekend because that hotel was freezing. So there's a ton more fun stuff than just playing poker, and hopefully me getting back at Roto Buzz Guy for stealing my money. No, it's going to be a blast. The whole expo is super fun. And we get to experience the new Hall of Fame dome that was under construction last year.
Oh,
So
that's
none
right.
of us have seen that yet. So I think it's going to be super fun. I'm excited.
You know what I'm excited for? I'm excited for more Jets representation at the Football Hall of Fame finally. I was like sitting there. It was last year and we were at the expo and I went and I did like the whole tour through the Hall of Fame and it's like you got hologram Joe Namath was in there, but you go into like their gift shop, right? And all the jerseys and all the shirts are there. And the only Jet thing that I saw was like an extra small vintage Joe Namath jersey, like like wouldn't fit like on one of my butt cheeks, right? And this thing is that, and I'm like, really? That's the only freaking thing you've got for the Jets here right now? Is this one jersey that is extra small? Like nobody wears that. No kid in his right mind would be like, "Oh, Dad, could you buy me this Joe Namath jersey?" No. So it's good to see Klecko and Revis. Well, maybe able to get maybe like a vintage 70s and 80s New York Jets Joe Klecko shirt or something.
Well, I have a feeling it's going to be full of Aaron Rodgers merchandise after with all Hard Knocks, with
Ugh.
all the off-season thing. I think that that's probably the best that you're going to get this year is
I
the
I
is
will
the Aaron
never.
Rodgers
I
jersey.
will
And
never.
I know you won't.
Never. No. No. Uh-uh. I will
Uh,
not own any Aaron Rodgers gear,
even if it's a gift.
even if it's a gift.
Okay.
Don't yeah, see, like you better put your credit card away, Britt. I don't want no gift from you. Not an
Uh,
Aaron Rodgers.
yeah.
Let's talk about something even more nauseating than Aaron Rodgers. Can we talk a little bit about Joe Mixon? Because
Yeah.
you actually have law experience in your background too, Britt. So let's talk to you about Mixon's civil lawsuit that's being filed against him because they're the victims' families. There was a shooting, a bunch of kids, teenagers, and the victim's family is saying that Joe Mixon supplied the bullets and supplied the gun as well. That was the murder weapon in this case. Now it's civil, it's not criminal. So I guess the question is because Drew and I talked about this on his show on the auction brief, and he kind of opined that there might be a game or two suspension looming here. Do you buy that? Is that I hate the fact that you're nodding right now. I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, with the civil case especially, it all comes down to what the NFL decides to do. And as part of your contract, you have a duty as both being an employee of the organization and being a role model for tons of kids. And let's face it, NFL athletes, whether or not they want to be, they are considered role models. You have a duty to act a certain way. Now, the spectrum of how you're supposed to act and the punishment. We've already talked about this ad nauseum on A Better Morning on this show a couple times about how inconsistent the NFL is in
Oh
actually
yeah.
implementing punishments and handing those things down. But I still think with the general tone of firearms in this country, that providing bullets to children is quite frowned upon. If they can prove in their civil case, and again, the civil burden of proof where well, Ernie just popped up. I thought he was going to say Drew was coming back and saving me. So I didn't have to talk about law
No,
stuff that I haven't
come
talked about in forever.
on.
But no, the burden of proof in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden of proof in a civil case is what we call a preponderance of the evidence, meaning that it's 51 to 49. So even if they just show a little bit in the direction of the fact that Mixon provided those bullets, then he can be found liable for that. If he is in civil court, especially, the NFL is going to have to take a hard look at what he did. Did it violate the policy? And in my opinion, I think that it did, especially when you kind of look over to the side about the fact that he waved a gun in public in a road rage incident like a week or two before that went down. Those are just two really bad incidents that kind of fell on top of each other. And I think that he might face a suspension.
What is that doing to you thought wise on Joe Mixon? I mean, we were all kind of like, I mean, we know it's a heavy passing offense for the Bengals, and they like to use the pass to set up the run and just let Mixon, kill that clock in the second half. The dude took a pay cut for 2 straight seasons to stay with the team because, he doesn't want to go A, on the open market with other running backs. B, his best chance to win a Super Bowl right now is with the Bengals. So I guess the question is, did he have an idea that this civil case was going to be pending against him? And that's why he agreed to take the pay cut so that he just stays with the team. What's this doing to you as far as drafting him and at his ADP?
Yeah, I think he had to have taken that legal situation into account when he chose to sign with them. We didn't talk about this earlier, but the NFL did implement new rules that you have to disclose certain legal incidents to teams when you sign with them. And if you don't, you can be punished. And they can punish you for events that happen if you're on the free agent market. So I think he might have been wondering, if this civil case verdict is handed down while I'm on the free agent market, is that going to play into the new rules? As far as ADP, I've seen him, he's up to RB 14 in our aggregate ADP rankings. It's fine, but it doesn't really move the needle for me as far as making me want to draft him. Now, Samaje Perine's gone, all of that, so he probably will have a heavy workload. But as far as his efficiency, I'm not biting on him right there.
All right, man. We need this show to be like 4 or 5 hours because we got so much more to talk about. Yet we got to wrap things up. I want to say thank you very much to our producer, Ernie Acosta. I'd like to say thank you to Drew Davenport. Again, at Drew Davenport FF on Twitter. Give him a follow and then check it out. The auction for those last 2 spots in the poker tournament all going to charity. I highly recommend that you guys do it. But in the meantime here, Britt, been a pleasure as always. We'll catch all you guys next time.